Thank you. Yeah, no, I definitely did. I mean, I always enjoy those sorts of conditions. It was massively tricky being that far back, in conditions where at the beginning, it was really not that easy to see. But and then we had the rolling start, which I don't think they needed to do a rolling start. So, and I don't really know why they did that one, but because it had dried up quite a lot and the spray wasn't that bad. So, but anyways, I'm happy to have come from all the way back there, recovered and got into the points. Not the result that I want this weekend, and definitely a weekend to forget. But positives to take from the car today. The team did a great job, as they always do throughout the weekend, and they did a great job within strategy today. So big thanks to them. And I'll try and do a better job for them next week.
On those positives, we talked a bit about the brakes recently. Do they feel a bit better today? Do you feel like
we got the settings better, and definitely, as you could see, I was feeling more and more confident bit by bit with more experience on it. So yeah, P1, practice one, and straight into qualifying with these new brakes definitely caught me out. And
can you imagine Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, publicly apologizing to Ferrari for a disastrous classification, and the next day starring in one of the most exciting comebacks of the year? What is really happening inside Ferrari? And what do your words mean for the future of the team? On Saturday in Spa, he became the bitter confirmation that the weekend of Lewis Hamilton was aimed at being one of the most bleak of his sports career. After a Friday loaded with errors, blockages, and frustration, many expected a champion response by the British, especially taking into account their historical ability to resurface under pressure. But what happened was, on the other hand, a repetition of pain. And this time with an even more cruel nuance. It was not a technical failure or an accident that left it out, but a small line deviation, a millimeter beyond the limit in a circuit that does not forgive. It was disqualified from the Q1 after exceeding the track limits in Rydillen, an error that pushed it to the 16th exit position. Another direct blow to morals. The hardest thing for Hamilton was not the punishment itself, but the way it came. His first fastback attempt had been placed just behind Charles Leclerc, in 7th position. It was enough to advance. Everything indicated that, at least this time, the bad start would be shake. But the subsequent review of the commissioners was relentless. When checking the exteriors of the car, they confirmed that the rear tire had stepped beyond the curb, invalidating their time. At a technical level, it was a clear, but also minimal infraction. One of those decisions that, although regulatory, end up being devastating for the mood of any pilot who has given everything in a return to the limit. But beyond the competitive, there was an emotional burden that began to overflow. Hamilton's words revealed to a pilot who no longer shields himself in the errors of the car, nor in the lack of adaptation. He assumed himself as the person responsible and faced him in front of the entire world. That public self-criticism, that way of loading with the weight of an entire team, was a leadership sample, yes, but also of obvious psychological wear. In Spa, Hamilton not only fought against the track and the stopwatch. He fought against the shadow of his own legacy, against the pressure of returning Ferrari to the top, against the ghost of the years in which each error was quickly compensated by a dominant car. The most significant improvement was the new rear suspension, a reconfiguration that implied not only a redesign of structural elements, but also a radical adjustment in the philosophy of the car. Until that time, the SF25 dragged an erratic aerodynamic behavior, especially in rapid curves and transition zones. This not only affected the stability of the car, but also the degradation of the tires, something that penalized both pilots in the final strokes. The decision to modify the front arm of the upper triangle of the suspension, lowering it several centimeters, was not a simple experiment. It was a declaration of technical principles. Ferrari wanted to generate more aerodynamic load without compromising the wear of the lower plate, one of the most critical areas under the current regulation. This change was aligned with a trend that Mercedes and McLaren had already adopted months before. Both teams managed to stabilize their platforms through similar adjustments, thus achieving greater predictability in high-speed curves. Ferrari, lagging in this area, knew that continuing with the old configuration was to continue losing ground. So the team bet strongly. The modified design would allow to roll with less height to the ground, a vital advantage in circuits such as Spa, where rapid sections require maximum aerodynamic efficiency without sacrificing traction. However, these modifications did not arrive without a doubt. During the filming day in Mugello, held on July 17th, Hamilton and Leclerc completed 19 laps each, exchanging shifts to try the new package. The test conditions were not optimal, and although relevant data were collected, conclusive validation was not obtained. Subsequently, Hamilton was cautious. In the simulator there was no difference, but we will surely learn, he said with a mixture of skepticism and hope. The truth is that in Ferrari there was division of opinions. Some engineers were convinced that the return for return would be at least 1/10 combining the new suspension with the updated flat background that debuted in Austria. Others, on the other hand, feared that the extreme conditions of SPA make it difficult to assess the true potential of the package. Beyond the data and figures, the fundamental thing was the change in mentality involved in these improvements. Ferrari went from a defensive posture trying to correct minor errors on an unstable basis to a clear offensive, redesigning key components with a long-term vision. This had direct implications in the confidence of the pilots. For Hamilton, who was fighting with the W13 and the W14 in Mercedes, the concept of a car that could be adjusted to his driving style was more than a luxury. It was a necessity. The British had had to adapt his piloting to adjust to the demands of the SF25, even imitating techniques of his partner Leclerc, how to release the accelerator before stopping to achieve a higher curve minimal speed. Therefore, although the results of the weekend in SPA did not show a dramatic improvement in terms of pure classification or rhythm, within the team there was a different sensation. Sunday's data, especially Hamilton's ability to trace from the Pittsburgh lane, indicated that the stability of the car had improved. The tire management was more consistent, and the interaction between chassis and aerodynamics showed signs of progress. It was not an immediate revolution, but a firm step in the right direction. In short, SF25 improvements represented much more than a set of new pieces. They were the reflection of a Ferrari who, after years of patches and short-term solutions, finally dared to redesign his future. And for a pilot like Hamilton, who arrived in Maranello with the implicit promise of redemption and legacy, these advances were the first tangible sign that their fight could be worth it. Because in modern Formula One, championships are not won alone with talent. They win with cars that understand their pilots as much as the pilots understand their machines. And Spa 2025, in silence, began writing that understanding. After 2 days of frustrations, incidents, and premature eliminations, the only thing that seemed to stay Lewis Hamilton was professional pride. But Spa-Francorchamps, with its unpredictable racing tradition, kept a different story for the British pilot. From the bottom of the grille, starting from the Pittsburgh lane due to a change in the configuration of its SF25, Hamilton wove one of the most inspiring comebacks of the season. And he did it with a mixture of determination, strategy, and career reading worthy of a world champion. The key to the comeback was, without a doubt, the constancy. Unlike other pilots who made mistakes at critical moments, Hamilton maintained a firm, intelligent rhythm. He knew when to keep tires and when to attack. On a track where grip conditions vary dramatic between sectors, and where each advance requires conviction, was able to read opportunities with surgical precision. One by one, it was overcoming rivals. Pilots with faster cars in line with a better track position, but without the adaptation capacity that characterizes the largest. What distinguished this comeback was not only the number of positions won, that alone is impressive, but the way in which each maneuver was built. In Eau Rouge and Radillon, sectors where the minimum error can mean the end of the race, Hamilton always kept the car in the ideal trajectory, gaining ground without compromising stability. In Les Combes, he knew how to take advantage of DRS as a tactical weapon, delaying braking and positioning the car with a mastery. Even in slow sectors such as the chicane final, where Ferrari had had traction problems all weekend, Lewis found a way to manage torque delivery to avoid blockages or subwiring. When he crossed the finish line in 7th place, the gesture on his face was not celebrated, but of serene determination. Subsequent statements were not a simple summary of the day, but a reflection on the path traveled. What happened today shows that when the car responds and there is teamwork, everything is possible. There was no triumph, only conviction. That phrase encapsulated everything that represented Spa for him. An internal and external battle, an adaptation process, and the beginning of a real symbiosis with Ferrari. It was, in short, a Sunday of redemption. Not in the simplistic sense of winning again, but in the deepest. Demonstrate that even in the midst of chaos, there is possible order. That even after error, there is room to build. And that when a pilot like Hamilton finds the balance between technique, emotion, and experience, which happens on the track, transcends the sports and becomes a narrative that inspires a whole team. What happened in Spa represented the first real sign that, despite conflicts, the connection with Ferrari is beginning to be built. We do not talk about an already consolidated alliance, but about an understanding that is being forged between intense emotions and technical realities. The public apologies of Hamilton, the recognition of their own mistakes, and the way he thanked the team after his comeback were gestures that went beyond the protocol. They represented a genuine intention to build a deeper relationship with engineers, mechanics, and the technical direction of the team. Because in Ferrari, personal ties matter as much as the results. It is not a purely transactional technical structure. It is a culture of shared identity, and Hamilton is learning to navigate in it. The Spa weekend, so it was not a simple history of redemption. It was a window to the emotional process of one of the most successful pilots of all time trying to reinvent themselves in the most demanding environment of motoring. The construction of that relationship between man and machine, between pilot and equipment, is far from completing. But if something was clear in Belgium, it is that Hamilton is willing to travel that path with honesty, delivery, and the conviction that he still has much to give. And if Ferrari is able to correspond to that energy, they can not only aspire to victories. They can write together one of the most intense and transformative stories that Formula One has seen in years. The answers to these questions will not arrive immediately. But what Spa did was demonstrate that Hamilton still has the intact competitive spark, that the passion has not turned off, and that Ferrari, for the first time in a long time, seems willing to bet on a long-term vision that combines veteran, technique, and emotion. In a championship where distances between leading equipment have been reduced and where the margin of error is minimal, that type of internal evolution can make all the difference.